Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of the Mumbai Manifesto. Our next question talks about redevelopment. Redevelopment is the big word in Mumbai, and it has been so for quite a few years. It's a city in perpetual redevelopment. Everything is broken down and new things are coming up, whether it is slums, whether it is old buildings, whether it is even chawls. And something interesting, old neighborhoods are changing character. Mumbai has always been about the Marathi Manus is central to Mumbai in the discussion of Mumbai. And the bastions of the Marathi Manus used to be places like Girgaon in South Bombay, or Dadar, or Parel. And with redevelopment, there's a vanishing of the Marathi Manus from Mumbai altogether. The whole demographic of that space has changed. So the question is, one, is there a need to preserve this demographic at all? I mean, at the end of the day, evolution is a part of every city. Should there be some kind of policy intervention to preserve a demographic? Is it important at all? And secondly, if you are going to interrupt the way free market functions, then what would be the tools that you use? I mean, how can you justify?
Yeah. So I'll give two examples here, and perhaps not from Mumbai, okay? Because I think there is a style in which we do redevelopment in Mumbai. Okay. So just two brief words on Mumbai's style, and then we will look at some of these international examples. Okay. So in Mumbai, you typically have the private sector coming in for redevelopment and taking the entire financial responsibility and the execution responsibility. The state or agency of the state acting in as a mediator or a facilitator, and a person who is a resident being increasingly converted into a beneficiary mode. Okay? So this is the way in which we do redevelopment. And for us, redevelopment, how it operates is through the tool of FSI and TDR. So the entire thing is, therefore, nobody pays from the pocket, right? And everybody tries to secure or maximize their benefits through the interplay of tools that they have in hand. So the government has at its hand how does one formulate the FSI or the TDR policy? What are the exceptions within FSI, TDR, and what are the ways in which you will calculate the FSI, TDR, so on and so forth. For the developer, it is basically a calculus of a particular plot area, net area, the overall zone, and what is the rate of TDR and in the market, and so on and so forth. And for the person who is the beneficiary, is basically in terms of making the decision, it is about how much more area do I get. Okay? And this is, I think, the way in which
correctly it is structured like this.
So I came across a very interesting example in Vienna. Vienna is also a very old city, a historical city, and with a very large proportion of social housing in previous years, which was built in the between the First and the Second World War. So housing which is more than 150, 200 years ago. So they have what they call a soft approach to redevelopment. Okay. And I was really impressed by this soft approach to redevelopment. What does that soft approach to redevelopment mean? So the soft approach to redevelopment firstly thinks about is there a need for total demolition of the building? Okay. Where and what is the extent of structural repairs which are required in a particular building? Right? what is the economic capacity of the residents? What is it that they can contribute? Okay. And then how can we think about the rest of the redevelopment cost, and how does one make that happen? Okay. And this is the facilitative role that the government agency plays in terms of making the economics happen, suggesting ways, and then consulting with and acting as a mediator between the developer and the residents to create a workable plan of action.
Right.
Okay.
But just to interrupt you very quickly, in a model that you are suggesting here, is there scope for adding more people to the redevelopment? Because if you're working with the same building, Mumbai's demand is to create more room.
It's not necessary. Okay. And I think the way, because the kind of rooms that we are creating, which are all for-profit rooms, I think Mumbai today has one of the highest vacancy rates.
Yes,
is something
almost
that
20%.
one will need to remember. That's one. And secondly, you cannot create this extent of cross-subsidization for everybody. I think that is what perhaps simple economic sense will tell you, rather than even having a researcher based in economics. No? You are trying to subsidize slum dwellers, you are trying to subsidize chawl dwellers, you are trying to subsidize cooperative housing societies, you are trying to subsidize dilapidated buildings. Okay, so roughly 80% of the city's population, one will try to create a free housing,
correct,
more area.
Right.
It is absolutely unfeasible. And by doing this, one is going to create a section of people then who find that affordable. But if you are going to do that, then for these people, this is going to be unaffordable.
Correct.
Right? So I think this dynamic, so this Vienna approach is something which is interesting.
Right.
And it really sheds light on what we see as the redevelopment model, where everybody wanting to extract something.
Right.
The state government wants to extract
correct,
premium and the revenue.
Right.
The developers definitely want to, and I am not begrudging them
correct,
that, right? But because they are taking the entire risk and the share
right,
for everything. And the residents also want a free area and more area to live in,
also
because they don't
so.
see a prospect of them buying a house in
correct,
this Mumbai at
correct,
all, even for their children, etc. Right? So I think we have locked ourselves into a very, very dangerous situation, and which is why I think redevelopments are becoming uglier and uglier. So I think one needs to really think through this entire policy that we have. I think there is another model which is very interesting, and which is in Hong Kong or in China for that matter. So in China, I mean, we often talk about Shanghai and so on and so forth. But Shanghai was a model where within 10 to 15 years, there was like a blitzkrieg of reconstructions and redevelopments. And the government, I mean, it has a political regime which can also facilitate this. But where there was just no questioning. I mean, the building is demolished, and then redeveloped. Okay, but gradually, because I think China responds in very complicated ways, and what I have seen happen in China is also that these fast and blitzkrieg kind of redevelopment models have given way to more consultative processes, more softer processes, because they are also much more in line environmentally. They are much more in keeping with the social fabric.
Right.
So, and I think one will gradually have to come down to that.
Right. China seems to have learnt its lessons.
Yes.
In many
At
ways.
least on some of these parts.
I just want to bring you back to a point of social housing. I think one of the successes of Bombay was the CHAR system that was in place. It was a form of affordable housing, social housing, community living, where there were a lot of shared commons. In fact, toilets were not in the houses most of the time. Balconies were the shared spaces. It generated a great social capital within those communities as well, but it was still within the formal sector, and those have disappeared. Is there a need for the government to step in and recreate, either as the owner or as the facilitator, a whole new stock of affordable rental housing. Why is this obsession with owning a house in Mumbai? You know, why
yes,
is?
But this is not just in Mumbai, Gautam. I think unfortunately, it is. I think which is something which has preoccupied India per se. In the post-independence years, we have given up on rental housing. Previously, Mhada used to have rental housing. By the late 1970s, they also started converting all their rental housing stock also into ownership basis. Basically, because I think what we have not developed, and this is what I see as a major gap, is that there is a need always for interim level institution. See, the state government can facilitate, they can construct through its building agencies, but they cannot maintain the estate management part of it, which involves, I think, collection of rent, ensuring that that rent is ring fenced and also used for the maintenance, upkeep of the buildings, and it also involves a lot of functions. People who are not paying rent, going and warning them, or the same thing about
earlier also a lot of these chawls were privately owned.
Yes, I agree. But what I'm therefore saying is, see, look at the case of BDD chawls.
Correct.
No, you have a classic instance of the PWD not being able to act as a estate manager.
Correct.
And therefore today, I mean, I'm not commenting on the redevelopment of VDD chawls, but we are definitely converting a huge chunk of rental housing into ownership housing.
Correct. No? Correct, which is a big loss for the city.
Absolutely.
Correct.
The MMRDA thought of a rental housing policy.
Right.
Right. And it constructed those super blocks in the periphery of Mumbai.
Right.
I think they are just horrible. But
there's no value if it's not in the urban core.
Absolutely. And not just that, but they are creating rental housing where there was industry.
Correct.
So the industry is not there now.
Correct.
So
there's no demand.
There's no demand there.
Correct.
No? You're creating rental housing in the midst of fields and so on and so forth.
Right.
Okay, but there you have created rental housing, but again no agency is to maintain that, right? Or you look at the current Government of India policy of the affordable rental housing complexes, and within those there is a tremendous opportunity.
Right.
But I think we need to create these midway institutions.
Correct.
Which would,
Correct.
I mean, what should I say? It may be a social landlord system like the UK has. However critiqued, whatever. But
some mechanism can emerge through public-private partnerships.
Correct.
I think the government needs to create a policy environment for private developers to come into the fray of affordable rental housing.
Actually, I think that will be one of the strongest interventions if one is thinking about ever slum-free Mumbai.
Right.
Improved labor mobility, and on the other hand, providing a range of affordable housing options is the only way in which one can reduce.
The city is losing out on students. No one wants to. I mean, Mumbai University was one of the best universities we had, and the students have drifted away from Mumbai. Industries have drifted away from Mumbai. Entrepreneurs have drifted away from Mumbai simply because they can't afford.
Correct.
Rents are sky high, and
and somehow the city is not coming up. So you see Bangalore, Hyderabad,
correct,
now coming up with a lot of sharing models, like
correct,
they have these hostels and so on and so forth, but we don't seem to be coming up with these, and clearly the prohibition comes from the kind of overall costs that there are.
Correct.
And therefore the government has to step in then with a policy for everything.
Right.
Cancer patients don't have a home, then you have to convert some other building into a specific cancer.
Correct.
But I think rather than creating these special purposive housing solutions,
right,
I think there has to be a concerted effort to overall improve the affordable housing,
and it's doable.
Expand rental housing.
I think policy intervention is required and it's doable. I think one of the culprits is whoever coined this term roti kapda makan and threw makan into it, and that makan got interpreted as ownership makan. I think the Indian dream has just been emburdened in so many ways. Today, so many young couples who have bought houses are enslaved with that whole EMI, and the whole life for 10-15 years
Correct.
revolves. Anyway, we'll move on to the next one. This conversation could go on forever.